Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another delicious Education Freedom Institute lunch. I'm today's host, Jason Bedrick, joined by my Heritage colleague, Matthew Ladner, and Jay Green and Ian Kingsbury of Do No Harm. Guys, all right. Oh, wait. It says an error occurred. Wait a moment, then try again. I think we're live.
It says live in the corner.
Are we? Because over here it says end screen. I don't know what I'm doing. This is why we need Matt Nielsen to.
It says live on mine.
Yeah. Okay. No one's watching. Okay, we are live though. Good.
Yeah.
Off to a rocky start. I love our low budget. Right. There's no editors here. There's no like fancy studio.
It's very authentic.
There's like a fake.
All of our money into the content.
Yes.
It's all in the quality content.
Right. Well, it's really because of the incredible advertisers we have. Should we stop to do our first paid promotion?
No,
Chesterfield's Fig Nuts.
It's because everything that we say and do is for the clicks.
There you go. Always for the clicks. We should get at least a dozen today. Okay. Well, we wanted to start today with an update. We've been going back to this subject over and over again, but I think it's important to give yet another update about Arizona. For those who recall, the opponents of school choice gathered we'll get enough signatures to put an initiative on the ballot that would severely curtail education savings accounts. So it would kick tens of thousands of kids out of the ESA. It would also impose a host of restrictions that are, guardrails, but really that are not meant to ensure accountability, but are really meant to make the program hard to run so that parents don't want to be a part of it, right? The whole purpose of this is to undermine it. And so in response, the Republicans in the legislature passed 3 competing ballot measures. One of them was
not really in response. I mean, they may have had other motivations too, right?
Yeah.
There's other motivations too, but let's just say that this was a driving factor.
Okay.
So one of them was a measure that would be a constitutional amendment that would protect military scholarships that are going to students from military families, and that would if any other law or ballot measure were to deprive students from military families of scholarships they would otherwise be entitled to, then that law or ballot initiative would be null and void in its entirety. That was struck down today by a district court judge. But we have it on good authority that the Goldwater Institute is going to be appealing that, and they are hopeful that at the higher levels that will actually be overturned. And really, it's a lot more complicated than that because there were a number of different questions, including the Secretary of State, who is a Democrat, wrote a title for this that would go onto the ballot.
The killing children referendum?
Sort of. I mean, this thing does a lot of things, but the way she phrased it, the way that the Secretary of State, actually, sorry, it's male, right? Fontes, Secretary of State. Yeah. The way the Secretary of State.
But are you sure? I mean,
yeah, well, these days you never know. But Fontes, the way Fontes phrased it was very prejudicial to the initiative. And so they are challenging that as well. So there's actually challenges going on in both directions on that. And so we'll see how that works out. There was a second measure, which, there's one that's not being challenged at all, which is that 60% of funds in a school district must be spent in the classroom. So that's
not being challenged in courts.
That's not being challenged in court.
Still has to go to the voters.
Yes, right. In other words, it will be on the ballot, so it'll be up to voters to decide. The third measure was about union payroll. So right now, the district schools actually collect the union dues for the unions. So it doesn't even you don't even see it in your paycheck. It's not like you get your paycheck and any other organization that you belong to, let's say you have a membership, right? Amazon doesn't get its Amazon Prime directly from your employer, right? Cut it out of your paycheck before you even see it. No, you actually have to pay for that on a regular basis, right? But for the unions, it comes directly from the district. And so there was a ballot initiative that would say, no, the government should not be in the business of collecting dues for private organizations. And so we're not going to do this. But the police union and the firefighters union were very upset by this. And
the referendum only referred to teachers.
It only referred to teachers, but they interpreted it in such a way that it would also cover them. And although the state legislators said, no, we weren't targeting you, we were only targeting the teachers. They said, well, in this clause, it says just teachers, but down over here, it seems to include any public employee. And so this has been challenged. It has now been struck down. And the legislature has opted not to appeal that decision. So, Matt, what are the implications of this for the anti-ESA ballot initiative?
It's messy and difficult. There's also a signature challenge going on, and so it may be that the unions don't ultimately have enough valid signatures to qualify for the ballot. In addition, the military constitutional amendment is now had one judicial finding against it, but that will be appealed.
Mm-hmm.
What was the basis of the district judge's ruling? Why?
I haven't had a chance to read it yet, so I'm not sure. So everything's up in the air, but I still like our position better than the other sides. And of course, there's always a possibility we just go, if we have to, go fight it out in public and win. If in the worst case scenario. So stay tuned, I guess. But it's gonna be a mosh pit for a while.
So maybe the implications seem to be that the unions, instead of spreading their money across 4 ballot initiatives now, they're really only going to have to spread their money across 2, maybe 3, depending on how the challenge goes. So they're meaning the challenge to the military scholarships bill. So maybe they are going to have more money for the challenge because Matt and I have heard through the grapevine that it does appear that the unions were not really putting up a big fight when it came to the signature challenge to the anti-ESA ballot measure. Meaning, if they were really putting up a fight, they would be filing all sorts of exhibits. They would be going signature by signature and saying, no, these signatures are actually valid. And instead, they were making more, broader claims that were related to the constitutionality of the statute itself that requires what's called strict compliance. So that has essentially already been litigated in the courts. The courts have never officially endorsed strict compliance, but they have endorsed a lower standard called substantial compliance, and they have applied it to various challenges.
This is the standard of how signatures are challenged.
Exactly. Okay. So, for example, the statute itself says, you have to have strict compliance, including, writing your full name and your address and, your actual phone number and so on and so forth. And when people have not given their address, given a fake address, given a non-working phone number, so on and so forth, the court has thrown out those signatures or thrown out, all the signatures from that petition gatherer, but they have done so under the substantial compliance standard, which is a lower standard. So anyway, it doesn't seem likely that they're going to win in court on a constitutional argument. Where they could really win is to say, well, you said this is a duplicate, but actually these are just 2 people with the same name. And they have different addresses. Or you said that this person is not registered, but actually this person is registered to vote. You may have missed their middle initial when you were looking them up or something. But that takes a lot of money. There are 200,000 signatures that are being challenged. It takes a lot of money to have people go through line by line, pick up the phone, call the voter, all that kind of stuff. And it's a lot less
unions
expensive.
also have legislative and executive branch races to fund as well, right?
Yes,
so they even if there are fewer referenda for them to fight on, and even if they still might decide that, look, they also probably have some internal guess of how strong their signature count really is.
Correct.
And if they're not very, maybe the reason why they're not doing this fight is not merely because of how much money they need for other referenda, but also how much money they need for other races and their own estimate of how likely they are to prevail.
Right.
Yeah, and it's
so that's a good sign that maybe they don't really have the signatures.
It's also worth noting that they were willing to make a deal in the late stages of the legislative session,
and so were some of our friends.
Yeah, yeah. There was a Wonder Twin Powers Activate super team up on that one, right? So you
guys, you were against every deal. That's what I've heard.
Yeah.
I don't know. I have it on good authority. That you undermined despite your lying words.
Yeah, right. That's not true. Everyone supported the version of the deal, but in any case, look, we don't know what the unions are going to do, and even if they were inclined one way, they may shift. So we're just going to have to fight this out.
And look, this is politics. Like, what do you expect? This is the way it's going to be, and in the long run. And I've said this before, and I'll keep saying it, over the long run, school choice has to get to the point, or maybe is already at the point in Arizona, where it can protect itself without having to capitulate to unreasonable compromises and suffer a death of 1,000 cuts in that process. At some point, it has to be able to stand, fight, and win on its own. And do so without the intervention of national choice organizations.
Although there's never total victory, right? And part of it, I think, is that those organizations are never going to go away. This is something I think we've talked about another.
Well, that's yes and no. Once upon a time, every election, the Republicans ran on the platform of repealing Social Security. It's true. They used to do that. I'm old enough to remember it, that they used to run on that platform. It was a losing platform.
No, you're not. You're not that old. Get out of here.
No, I'm that old.
No, when did you think that happened?
Through the Reagan administration, they still ran on that platform.
No.
Yes, they did.
No.
They did. They said it. They didn't mean it. They didn't do anything about it. But they said it. Because this was just a thing. Like, we hate Social Security and we're going to fight it. And at some point, you just stop. You just move on to something else. And so the unions aren't going to go away, and their opposition to school choice is not going to go away. But at some point, they're going to have bigger fish to fry, and they're going to see this as something they just can't win on.
I'm not even talking about the unions. I'm also talking about Ed Reform Inc. and the incentives that they have to remain intact.
Oh, they also don't. No one ever really goes away as long as the money still flows.
Yeah.
But they shift their focus, and so the people defending Social Security were AARP, right? And they used to be like the big advocacy organization. They were the AFC of Social Security, okay? And they still exist, even though there's no real threat to Social Security anymore at all from anyone. They still exist, and they still send out mailers and raise money for protecting Social Security. But they're really in the business of selling discounts on insurance and travel.
Right.
So they've morphed into a different business.
Well, look, to Ian's point, though, the Republicans also always used to run on shutting down the Department of Education. That essentially went away, and now it's back. It's going to be a spirit. It's very soon. It's going to be a spirit Halloween. It's just going to be seasonal. Now, in all seriousness, and this isn't a topic for today, but they're shrinking it down 87%. By the end of the year, they're going to have 500 employees, and they're actually going to move out of the Department of Education building by Halloween. So, these things can come back, but then again, some other things are won permanently. Nobody's talking about bringing back slavery. No one's talking about repealing women's suffrage, except on the dark corners of the manosphere, but
national think tanks.
Right. But there are certain
with Beritage.
There are certain things that are won seemingly permanently, but not necessarily. Even in Arizona, years ago, charter schools used to be under attack all the time. And now they're too busy fighting against ESA, and they don't care anything about what's going on in charters. They don't fight charters.
Well, some of that is because the charters they've gone the path of death by 1,000 cuts.
Right.
They've done to them like.
Well, I think we have to be on offense, right? If we want to win, we have to constantly be moving the ball. We can't constantly, and this is a problem I think for conservatives generally, is that conservatives tend to just be on defense all the time. The left or the progressives are constantly trying to make moves, and we're just trying to stop it. We shouldn't be doing that. We should have an affirmative vision of education in particular, and we should try to advance it. And that's what we're trying to do in Florida. And so Florida has it totally undermines the segue if you're like, oh, great segue. But, so Florida, as regular listeners know, Florida about 8 months ago actually adopted the Phoenix Declaration unanimously in their State Board of Education. And last week, the State Board of Ed took the next step, which is they were in the process of updating their teacher training standards. And what they did is they took the Phoenix Declaration document and they embedded it throughout the entire standards. So for, Ryan Petty, who's the chair, said that the working group intentionally incorporated its guiding principles throughout the educator preparation standards, where they naturally align with effective instructional practice, professional responsibilities, and educator development. And in some cases, they took language from the Phoenix Declaration almost verbatim. So in one case, they referenced the Phoenix Declaration in their new Florida Educator Accomplished Practices Progression Plan. It requires that Florida educators embed the principles of the Phoenix Declaration into daily professional actions and decision-making. And in their uniform core curricula, which is, this is basically the standards for teacher training programs in Florida. They have created a new course that all Florida teachers are going to be required to take, but before they get their teaching degree, which is called, I just had it here a second ago, sorry, Foundations of Civil Discourse, American Exceptionalism, and Western Civilization. And the language in this is very much in line with the Phoenix Declaration's cultural transmission principle. And it requires teacher candidates to acquire the knowledge necessary to, quote, accurately and faithfully transmit to their students the founding principles, documents, and history of American constitutional government. It talks about the value of civil disagreement. It talks about that a proper education is focused on the formation of a child's character. That's right from the Phoenix Declaration. That they must cultivate the virtues and discipline necessary for self-governance, rather.
So can you just, again, anticipate and rebut the common ghost story told about this, which is that this somehow is restricting free speech or indoctrinating children or something like that? Explain why you don't think that's what this is.
Right. Well, first we have to have a definition of indoctrination, right? Because basically what people mean by indoctrination is usually views that don't agree with me. So I educate my kids in my views, and you indoctrinate your kids in other views. Right? We have to reject that framing. Indoctrination is presenting children with one view and expecting them to believe it unquestioningly, right? That's indoctrination. What we really want is education, which is exposing kids to a variety of views, as we call it in the Phoenix Declaration itself, the great debate in Western civilization, right? So Plato and Aristotle, the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, right? There are people on both sides that of an issue. Now, that doesn't mean we expose them to all views, right? We are not giving equal time to Nazism and communism and, racial identity politics, right? So actually, one perhaps controversial part of these standards is the standards say in Florida's teacher training programs, we are not doing critical race theory.
Well,
what's that?
Just so I understand, I mean, as you're talking about the mechanics of it, you're saying they have to take a course that sort of initiates them into these things. And so we can imagine the types of courses that are going to be on either side of it, right? I mean, it's simply like a small detour into that world. Actually, it's increasing ideological viewpoints and diversity.
Yes, because they're getting, it's mostly left-wing classes, and then you're getting one class that says, you have to learn about natural rights, the consent of the governed, separation of powers, and in the intellectual heritage of these ideas in the Greco-Roman tradition, the Judeo-Christian tradition, the Renaissance, Reformation, Enlightenment, etc. Right? So they're getting a grounding in
nothing about the Iroquois.
Yeah, nothing about the Iroquois. Yeah. Anyway, so I think this is a great step in the right direction. So it does say we're not going to be doing critical race theory in this document. It defines critical race theory essentially as teaching that racism is not just prejudice, but that racism is systemic, and that it was intentionally embedded in our founding documents and our institutions to preserve white supremacy, right? So that they are drawing the line and saying our schools are not going to be teaching this pernicious idea to teachers anymore.
To teachers. This is ed school training for teachers.
Ed schools, right? And look, I think it is perfectly within the purview of the state of Florida, or any state, to say we want our teachers trained on certain subjects and certain ideas, and not other subjects and other ideas. And that's perfectly fine.
They're not going to learn my levitation theories in their science training.
Right. Exactly.
But how gravity is just a Western paradigm.
Right. And, doctors in our state are not going to be trained in crystal hearing therapy. And, so it is appropriate to have certain standards. And this is a standard they're saying that, they're not saying we're not going to teach about slavery. What's that?
Private ed schools can have courses in whatever.
Sure. I mean, the schools can teach anything they want, but if you're training to be a teacher in a Florida public school, then these are the standards that they want the ed schools to adhere to, and they have a year to do it. It's going to be up and running August 1st, 2027.
And what happens if they don't do it?
That I don't know.
Double secret probation?
Possibly.
I will write you a letter explaining how disappointed I am.
But look, they're also, raising the bar when it comes. They're raising the bar when it comes to quality as well. So every teacher candidate has to demonstrate competency in the cognitive science of learning, including cognitive load theory, retrieval practice, and working and long-term memory, and evidence-based emphasis consistent with the Phoenix Declaration's call for proven teaching methods over fads or experimental teaching methods. So in other words, they can't just go to the ed schools as they do now and just read, Pedagogy of the Oppressed and a bunch of other left-wing texts and never learn classroom practices or discipline practices.
Just to be clear, no one's actually reading that.
No one's reading those either, right?
They're signed it.
Yeah,
maybe,
signed it.
But no one's actually reading it. including
now
the professors.
right.
I mean,
And look, there's a whole wealth of evidence that on how kids learn that is not being taught in the ed schools. It's not being taught to teachers. Like they're learning this down the hall in a different department, and not in the education departments. So it's very important that we do raise the bar. And another way we've shown that we can raise the bar is actually through school choice. And so the New York City charters have been shaming the district schools. Matt's got some more information about that.
Okay, well, every once in a while, I guess if we occasionally say here on the podcast, you run across something and you're like, huh, look at that, right? So I've been doing some research on co-location, and I was looking at the Stanford Educational Opportunity Project data. If you go to the first slide, this is, I'll decipher this chart for you, but every dot is a school. This is nationwide data. And this is along the bottom, running from right to left, is the percentage of free reduced lunch kids in the school. All these schools are public schools. So at the right is 0, and at the left is 100% free reduced lunch eligible. Okay. And then the up and down, this is a chart of academic proficiency. Okay. And so combined math and reading in grades 3 through 8. And basically the various lines here, you can be either, a certain number of grade levels above the national average or grade levels below the national average. The green dots are above the national average and the blue dots are below. Okay. So what I did was I went and isolated to find how many public schools in this data set, which covers most of the country, had schools that were 60% or more free reduced lunch eligible and whose students were 2 or more grade levels ahead of the national average in academic proficiency on their state tests. Okay. So this is way over on the left and above 2 grade levels in the green. Okay. So if you go to that next slide, Jason, what you find out is that there are, I think, 25 schools, public schools in the entire country that are both 60% or more free reduced lunch eligible students and 2 or more grade levels above the national average in academic proficiency. 25. Okay. So of those 25, 12 of them were charter schools located outside the state of New York. 9 of them were charter schools located in the state of New York. 5% of them were magnet schools.
Percent or 5 count?
5 total. Yeah, not percent. I'm sorry. So 5% were magnet schools, which is kind of amazing. Because magnet schools, of course, are able to screen their student bodies by giving them tests and considering their.
These are magnet schools nationwide, not in New York.
Correct. Magnet schools nationwide. Okay. So, and finally, the standard district schools, of which I think there are 98,000 nationwide, not a single one. They get a 0 number of schools that qualify as that. Okay. So, New York has some really amazing charter schools. Obviously, several of these 9 are success academies, but not all of them. There are some other charter schools in New York that fall into that category. I suspect that the co-location policy has something to do with this because it basically means that the operators don't have to pay for a facility, right? So typically, a charter school nationwide is spending 15 to 20% of their total revenue on either financing or renting a facility. Those funds in New York are available to do other things, like, for instance, paying teachers, right?
So you're saying if the standard districts spent more, they would have more too, right?
Yeah, they apparently it's not working out for them.
So it's not merely the freeing of resources that explains this.
No, it's not. But obviously, I think there's 300 and something charter schools in New York. Having 9 of the 25 is way overrepresented. So it's certainly not the only explanation. I think it's
So
just
there is one other side of this screen that you haven't mentioned, which is having more than 60% eligible for free or reduced price lunch, right?
Yep.
And so and that itself is broken up into two things, which is having that many students who are eligible, and the other is collecting and recording the information that they're eligible, right?
Right.
So New York City schools may have the sophistication and infrastructure for collecting and recording that information. There may be other schools out there, charter schools out there in the country,
that's
that
true.
they're not offering lunch.
Yes.
So they're not bothering to collect the information. So they have plenty of poor kids. They just don't record it.
Yes. That's certainly the case. There are many charter schools in Arizona that don't participate in the free reduced lunch program, so would fall into that category. But here's what I think is most interesting about this. If you look at the New York charter school sector as a whole in the Stanford Educational Opportunity Project data, it's not extraordinary. It has extraordinary schools, obviously. I've just shown you, 9 of them, right? But as a sector, it's not that extraordinary, right? And despite the fact that they basically, I don't know how many.
What do you mean as a sector, they're not that extraordinary?
I mean, if you plot either their academic proficiency or growth as a sector, they don't look like, there's some charter school sectors statewide that'll just pop off the page, right? Like if you look at Arizona or Texas or California, quite frankly, and you look at their academic growth, it's like, wow, look at that. They're almost all high growth schools. Okay. New York's charter school sector is not like that. They have high growth schools, but they also have low growth schools, right?
The experts at NACSA insist that SUNY is one of the best authorizers in the country. So are you sure about that?
Yeah, I am quite sure about that.
You mean the experts are wrong?
I have a theory about this, and my theory is that what is holding the state of New York's charter school sector back as a whole is their cap, right? There's a cap on the total number of charter schools. So the ability of this super high performing charters to replicate themselves is limited by statute there. Like, God forbid we'd want any of these more of these.
I thought the argument for having a cap was that way we'd make sure that we only had the very best.
Right, except for it didn't work out that way. There are sadly like low performing charter schools in New York, and they're still there. And quite frankly, why wouldn't they still be there? They don't face much competition. Right. In the long run, right, the ability of high demand schools to replicate themselves is key to creating a high quality sector overall. And that is thwarted by statute in New York. So I'll also say this, the state of Florida passed a co-location policy. And, I don't know what's going to happen with this new mayor in New York, but it seems to me like it's a little bit of an escape to Florida story, which, kind of like everything else in New York these days. Good for Florida for, availing themselves to these schools and these models. But I think what Florida has done is actually far too limited. Their statute is, only for school districts that have a lot of space and have very low performance, and only for super high performing charter schools to come in, right? That's a start. But quite frankly, there's not a single district school in Florida that even begins to approach what we see amongst those nine New York charter schools. The state of Florida ought to be putting those schools anywhere and anywhere they can get them, right?
And it's so fast growing. That was part of the key to charter school success in Arizona was rapid growth. The traditional schools couldn't even keep up with the demand. This is probably also true in a lot of Florida right now.
Low demand charter schools in Arizona die an unceremonious and not so slow death, right? Because
but part of how the charter schools got as much freedom as they got in Arizona.
Well, yes, that's true
The
too.
traditional
Although,
couldn't say we don't need an expansion.
right. But to Ian's point before, no, NACSA has it exactly wrong, right? What we need are charter school sectors where, high demand schools squeeze out the low demand schools, and over time you wind up with a high quality sector. So SUNY New York might be the greatest charter school authorizer ever. So what? They don't have any new schools to authorize.
I have it on good authority from some of the leading researchers that the way you could do that is if you have a responsible authorizer, that they regularly close the low performing charters and replace them with high ones. Right.
Yeah.
And so in fact they've proven mechanistically that if by definition everyone below 5 feet tall is replaced by someone above 6 feet tall, that average height increases.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't work out in practice though, mysteriously, because these decisions are made politically. They're not made by philosopher kings, right, with unlimited power. They're made by.
Well, also, their methods of measuring what's good and bad are imperfect.
That is also true. So, for instance, there's one of the charter schools in this Stanford data that has one of the highest academic growth rates in the country, is located in Nogales, Arizona. And if Arizona had been dumb enough to adopt a 5-year default closure measure, it would have closed. And today it has a rate of academic growth that's 94% above the national average. Like, wow, what if an authentic community-based charter school needs more than 5 years of runway to actually get going? How many schools like that did we close with these heavy arbitrary things that claim
the lives of the children in those first 5 years?
Right. Yeah, if only they'd gotten to go to district schools in Nogales, their lives would have been so much better. Right? Like this ultimately boils down to the question of who should be making these decisions, right? And
me and my smart friends.
The smart people are not as smart as they think, number one. Number two, they operate in a highly politicized environment where they start making decisions based on politics, not based on what makes sense. So in any case, it is amazing to me that the New York City charter school sector has some just off the charts amazing schools, but they're literally constrained in their ability to replicate. And they have a bunch of bad charter schools that apparently the best authorizer in the country hasn't been able to close. Shocker.
So, what would really help the Florida schools, though, the charter schools in Florida, is if they had teachers with an eye patch, like Kurt Russell.
Yeah. Right.
Escaping from New York.
Yeah. But see, like Kurt Russell actually went into New York to get the president, right? Isn't that what happened? Then he had to escape. Right. Yeah. Snake Plissken, as I recall.
Right. Well, maybe Ron DeSantis will have to go up into Mom Donnie's New York to rescue all these kids in the 9 successful charter schools and bring them down to Florida. But I think we're going to have to leave it there, folks. This has been another delicious EFI lunch. See you all next week.